past year, during Pride Shabbat, I shared a story about a trip to Italy my grandmother took my brother and me on when I was in high school. Between planning to take our own teens to Italy this year and the current level of anti-Semitism we're facing, I've been thinking about that trip a lot. More than the trip itself, the part that stands out to me was what actually happened on the flight over to Italy. My grandmother, noticing that I was wearing my Magen David, said to me, "Dalia, I think you should take your star off." I asked her why. She replied, "We're going on a tour of Italy. It's a very Catholic country, and the people on our tour might be prejudiced against Jews." With my 15-year-old sense of bravado and righteousness, I said, "Well, if they're not going to like me because I'm Jewish, I'd rather know on the first day than find out partway through the tour when I might already like them." Sensing my confidence and probably a bit of naivete, she let me keep it on. Looking back on that incident with a few more years of wisdom and experience, I recognized that her concern was rooted in her own life experiences. Having lived through World War II, she knew the danger of simply being Jewish. I, being only 15 and having grown up with little to no personal experience with anti-Semitism, couldn't fathom why I would hide my Jewishness. Sure, I knew our history, but it was just that, history. I specifically thought about that incident the other day when I left our office wearing my kippah. Since it's one of these beautiful metal ones, it's not so easy to take off and throw in my purse, so I either had to leave it on or hold it in my hand along with all the other stuff I was carrying as I walked home. And I thought about, do I want to be so publicly Jewish? Prior to October 7th and the subsequent rise in anti-Semitism, I wouldn't have thought about it. I would have left it on and hoped that I didn't forget it at home the next morning when I came back to work. But this week it gave me more pause. The reality is, being Jewish these days can make you a target, whether it is simply for looking Jewish or being assumed to be a Zionist. My very identity can make others so agitated that they may cause me harm. Over the past few weeks, we have been reminded of that very real fear in numerous ways, from a man being attacked as he left his synagogue on Tisha B'Av, one of our most solemn days of the Jewish calendar, to the sense of Shabbat being shattered by the events at Central Synagogue last week. There is a justified, growing concern among our community for our safety. But this is unfortunately nothing new. As Jews, we have faced persecution and harassment simply for who we are time and time again. We have faced quiet anti-Semitism that kept us out of certain professions or schools. We have faced overt persecution that saw us kicked out of our communities or forced to visibly identify ourselves as Jewish. And we have also faced genocide and attempts to wipe us out completely. And yet, we are still here. With each of the forms of persecution we have faced, it would have been easier to give up our religion and assimilate into the predominant community. And yet, in each of our stories of persecution, we also have seen valiant models of bravery and courage that have shown us how to face fear head-on and continue living our lives as proud and visible Jews. This bravery and courage was on display last week. When a man disrupted services at Central Synagogue, my colleagues, Rabbi Andrew Kaplan-Mandel, Rabbi Rachel Hauser, Rabbi Rebecca Thau, and Cantor Jenna Parsall modeled for us what it means to act in the face of fear. As the man was being escorted out, they expertly guided the community back into prayer and security. As Mitchell Shamans, a member of Central Synagogue and a board of trustee at HUC wrote, "While the event itself was jarring and distracting, the much more compelling aspect of the evening was the extraordinary response of the clergy team. They instantly focused on rekindling the Sabbath candles. Rabbi Hauser offered a moment of a few deep breaths to help us settle back into Shabbat awareness. Rabbi Kaplan-Mandel offered a warm and delightfully witty ufruf. No intruder was going to mar the blessing for that wedding couple. Rabbi Thau adroitly incorporated the unsettling experience into her sermon, and Cantor Purcell's voice and leadership of the musical team enriched each moment. By the time we reached Hashkivenu, there was no doubt that the congregation, together with our clergy, was embraced in a Sukkat Shlomecha, a sukkah of peace. While continuing services itself was an act of courage and bravery, the easier thing would have been to evacuate the space, cancel the rest of the evening services, but by relighting the candles and continuing to pray and sing, we sent a message to the world that even in the face of hate, we will continue to honor our traditions. We sent a message to the world that even in the face of hate, we will continue to live by the values that have guided us for generations. And we sent a message to the world that even when being Jewish is scary and hard, we will not be deterred. And finally, we sent a message that Jews and Judaism will not quietly slink off out of sight and out of existence. Several years ago, I was in Israel for a summer study session. A colleague and I were heading to get some ice cream after a long day of studying and gathering, an Israeli tradition. Before we got there, there was an air raid siren. Once the threat had passed, we decided to continue our quest for ice cream despite the interruption. As we reached the store, we saw several more colleagues, all of whom had had the same idea. As we enjoyed our ice cream, we were talking about the fear of the siren, and Rabbi Feinstein remarked that we were enjoying resistance ice cream. And that even though there are those who want to scare us away from living our lives, we were resisting the desire to stay home where it might be safer. By continuing to engage in everyday life, even the simple act of going outside to get ice cream, we were proving to ourselves and the world that we can't be scared away from who we are. But yes, the next day in class, the staff of the Hartman seminar did go over the air raid procedures. Thankfully, the rest of the trip was quiet, and apart from the sound of rabbis arguing over the Torah. Yes, walking into a synagogue or a Jewish institution these days might give us a moment of pause. But this week's Torah portion begins with the word, when you go out. It's not an if. We all face challenges, hurdles, potholes, and unexpected obstacles. But if we turn back at the first sign of trouble, we will never grow, we will never experience new things, we will never conquer our fears, and we will never know the joy that accomplishment can bring. This week's Torah portion reminds us that even when we are afraid, we must go out and meet that fear. But that courage is coupled with something else, something profoundly Jewish. Immediately after telling us, Ki tetzeh, when you go out to meet our enemies, God will deliver them into your power. It then reminds us of how we are obligated to act towards the captives, towards our family, our friends, and our community. Even while teaching us to be brave, the Torah is teaching us to hold fast to our values, to act with compassion and justice, and to remember our humanity. Even when the world doesn't treat us with justice and compassion, when God delivers our enemies into our hands, we are still commanded to act with justice and morality. Both in persecution and in power, we are commanded to live by the values of our tradition. Ki tetzeh, when you go out, whether you are afraid or confident in your power, you must live by the commandments God has given us. I now understand why my grandmother worried about my star all those years ago. She knew something that my 15-year-old self blessedly had not yet learned, that sometimes being visibly Jewish comes with real risks. I dream about living in a world where my only concern when walking home with my kippah on is that I might forget it the next morning and have to wear one of my many other kippot. But that's not the world we live in. So instead, I will go out into our world with compassion and courage, and I will continue to live my values out loud and with pride. May we all be blessed with enough courage to face the real fears and threats that exist in our world. But may we also be blessed with enough compassion to hold true to our values. And when the world does try to derail our Shabbat, may we take a breath, relight the candles, and continue singing with our full voices and our whole selves. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so.